What's going on, guys? We are Such Live, and this has been a while. We do a weekly live event on Sensible Prepper, and we decided that we wanted to talk about guns.
That's right.
I think one of the last times we did this, we actually touched a gun and they shut us down. So we're not going to touch any guns. Just want to set that straight. But welcome to the live event, and we are talking about 1911s.
One of my favorite subjects.
Yes. Why is it the most popular handgun really ever made?
Ever.
Yep. And, but now there's some pros and cons for sure, because this gun was designed in 1911, but it's still as popular today as it ever has been. So we're going to have Robbie Wheaton with us, which he has been a master gunsmith for over 20 years. He builds custom 1911s, does a lot of competitive guns for competitors.
Competition and carry. Yep.
Carry, you name it. And so we just thought it'd be great to kind of come in. I'm going to ask some questions mainly. I might have some input here and there, but we're going to be talking to let Robbie show some of his thoughts about the 1911. And we also appreciate Sarah Mack. She's over on the computer, on the monitoring the comments. And guys, if you have some questions, you can go ahead and start putting them in there, and she'll watch for them. And then we're going to take a little break, and we'll take some questions. We also appreciate Sportsman's Guide. They sponsor today's episode. You get $20 off every $100 or more purchase using Such, no 00. And it's just a great resource for a lot of stuff.
Yep, absolutely. And make sure you check out their Buyers Club as well. With their Buyers Club, you get additional savings as well as free shipping on any order over $49.
We have to give that plug.
Got to.
Because we really appreciate Sportsman's Guide. And we spend a lot of money personally there and get our discount.
That's right.
Okay.
Awesome magazine.
Yeah,
too.
yeah, it is. It's just a great deal. We really appreciate those guys. Okay, so I'm going to have a hard time. I want to grab that. But we're not going to do it.
You see how I'm sitting here?
Yeah, that's right. I'm going to sit here. That's a good idea. That's a good idea. Okay, so the 1911. I mean, most of you guys are familiar with the 1911. Hopefully, we're going to talk about some things that maybe, just something about the specifics. I mean, there are so many out there, and the price ranges from, $400 or $350 all the way up to $5,000, $10,000, and beyond. So, there is a wide variety of different options. But first, we'll talk a little bit about the history. Of course, John Moses Browning was the designer of the 1911, along with a lot of other guns that are really cool. And I believe it was actually invented I think he got the patent in 1904. And then the U.S. military took it up in 1911. They were switching. They wanted something that had some more power to it.
Yep.
And 45 ACP, as they say, they all fall a ball. And it was a devastating round.
Oh, yes. After the Spanish-American War, they were still using the 38 Special, and they were having a lot of issues with a lack of stopping power with the 38 Special. And that was one of the big pushes to move over to a larger caliber. And that was where the 1911 originally came from.
Right. Yeah. They said a lot of the natives over in the South Pacific, they would come down, they'd have this really tight bamboo across their chest. And so you'd shoot them and it wouldn't even affect them. Yep. It'd kill them later. And so they ended up switching to the 45, and it ended that in a hurry.
Not the Spanish-American War. What was the?
I think it was in Papua New Guinea or somewhere where they had the Moros, or maybe even New Zealand. Some areas over there where they had native South Pacificers, but
like a penetration with a 38 Special.
Yeah. And so they upgraded, went to the 45 ACP, and then of course went into World War I. Devastating trench warfare handgun. The Germans feared the 1911. In fact, Alvin York took a 1911 and captured 100 different Germans with one 1911. Of course, that's one of those kind of out there stories, but true as well. Then also it served all the way through World War II.
Yep.
Very valiantly, and then went into Korea, Vietnam as an issued pistol. In 1985, it was replaced by the Beretta M9.
That's right.
So for a long time, the 1911 served the U.S. military very well. So, but obviously, polymer striker fire pistols, double capacity, high capacity or standard capacity magazines compared to the 1911 with 7 to 8 rounds. Then you go up to 15 in a Glock 21.
Mhm.
So, there's definitely some huge advantages. And let me just say this. We don't carry 1911s typically.
Yep.
I do carry 1911s once in a while. I do take advantage of modern technology with the more round count and the smaller pistols.
And the lighter weight.
Right.
That's one of the big things is the weight of your polymer frame guns compared to the all steel 1911s.
Right. And the capacity. So there's a lot of advantages to modern firearms, and that's not what we're talking about today. We're just going to kind of get into the 1911, why I think everybody should own at least some sort of 1911. It just kind of puts you back with a legendary firearm. Okay, so with the 1911, the originals, Robbie, they had the grip safety. There was a little tang.
They did.
They had the tang hammer. Kind of no frills.
It was a very basic. It was a warfighter's handgun, and no beaver tail grip safety. The grip safety on it was very small. You could end up getting a hammer bite if you high grip the gun. But the way that they gripped the gun 100 years ago was typically one-handed.
Right.
It wasn't the two-hand stance, modern or modified isosceles like we use today. It was more of a two-handed grip or a one-handed grip on the gun. And you tend to grip the gun lower and a lot less chance of hammer bite, and also a lot less chance of not disabling the grip safety on the pistol because you're one-handed gripping it instead of two-handed gripping it. So it gives you a lot more. It was a very viable option way back then. And just a great, even the old guns were still great shooting pistols. They were, even though they were mass produced, they were still a very accurate, very reliable handgun.
Yeah. Now, one of the big things, like we have a Colt 70 series here, and a lot of the features on it are the same as a lot of your military firearms.
Yep. Very reminiscent of what you used to see with your original 1911s, with either a serrated or a checkered backstrap, your hammer, your lack of a beaver tail, the very subtle sights on the gun. I mean,
the combat sights
small,
are so
small.
low.
Yep.
Yeah. It's funny. I used to do a lot of IPSC matches, combat pistol matches, and I had a Colt Gold Cup, and it had the high sights and the beaver tail and everything. And then I would take out my standard 70 series, and man, it made a world of difference with speed.
Yep.
And so a lot of these features, a lot of times, guys, you're adding things to the gun, and sometimes we just get like Glocks. Glocks are the worst. Everybody's just putting on all kind of stuff on the Glocks. But if you ever really take those two side by side, sometimes you find out that those advantages are worth it in a lot of cases.
That's right. Significantly beneficial.
Right. And the high ride beaver tail, to me, was one of the biggest pluses.
Yeah, to me as well. I think that was one of the biggest design improvements that was ever made with the 1911, was going from the little spur beaver tail to the high ride beaver tail grip safety. And then the addition of the speed bump on that for people that were shooting two-handed, which allowed you to still be able to actively engage the grip safety with a higher grip on the pistol.
Right. Now, you have larger hands.
I do.
You have trouble with the grip safety.
Especially if it doesn't have the speed bump on it. Even without the speed bump on a high ride, and even with it sometimes, I still have a hard time disengaging the grip safety. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll cut a little piece of the felt side of a Velcro and stick that to the speed bump to give me a little extra off of the grip safety to be able to disengage it.
Right. And you've done a lot of competitive shooting. A lot of competitive shooting.
Yeah, a little over 20 years now.
Right. So gunsmith, competitive shooter. I'm just a YouTube gun reviewer.
I'm just well-rounded.
But the thing is with these 1911s is that, again, there are so many different things that you can do to them, but it takes more fitting.
They do. The 1911 is traditionally not like a Glock. There's a lot of the parts have to be hand fitted on those guns. The slide has to be hand fitted. The barrel has to be hand fitted. The fire control group, your hammer, your sear, your disconnector. Even the triggers on these pistols, if you buy an aftermarket trigger, generally that trigger is going to be oversized and is going to have to be filed or stoned to fit in the trigger slot. So almost every part on this gun requires some sort of hand fitting to be able to get it in the pistol and make it work and work correctly. Especially the barrels. There's very few drop-in aftermarket barrels available for the 1911 that work across the board on all 1911s, just because of so many different variances with hood width and lug length on your standing lugs, and then on your upper lugs as well. And then the bushings, you get to the front of the gun, you've got the barrel bushing, and the barrel bushings, there's a ton of different sizes on those, and all the barrel bushings have to be fitted for the ID of the slide as well as the OD of the barrel. So a lot of hand fitting involved with going through and building one of these guns and putting it together and upgrading it.
Even the mainspring, it's got those 3 leaves, and if you don't set those just right, it can affect the functionality of the gun.
Well, I tell you, the mainspring is one of the biggest things with a 1911. Guys buy one, and it's got a 6-pound trigger pull out of the box, and they're like, I hate the trigger pull on this gun. What do I need to do to fix it? 9 times out of 10, if you know how to tune the mainspring, you can cut your trigger pull weight in half just by tuning the mainspring.
Now, that's one of the big things about the 1911 is the trigger pull is the best.
It is. Yes,
it is. And it's funny because we're all going to this flat face trigger. Flat face trigger. That's the whole idea with the 1911. It's a straight pullback. Even if it does have a curve in the shoe, it's a straight pullback, and it can be set very crisp with the single action.
Yeah, you've got to have typically about 30 thousandths of pre-travel before you hit the sear wall, and that allows your disconnector to function properly. But once you pull that 30 thousandths and you engage the sear wall, then you've got just a really short break and then a reset that, about the same thing, about 30 thousandths out to reset it.
Right. Now, one big thing to me about the 1911 is the safety factor. And a lot of it has to do with the grip safety. The gun cannot fire unless you have a grip on the gun. So you could drop the gun could get caught with the trigger, even with those safe action triggers, with the little blade safety. They can catch on something. There was a guy that had one time, and he put it up on some hook, and it bounced and it shot just like this. I mean, it just fired.
And the recoil would keep making it go off. That's right.
So with the 1911, you've got that grip safety. So you've got to really mean to put your hand on it. And then you have your frame safety. So, one of the ways that I carry my 1911s is cocked and locked. One in the tube, safety up, put it in your holster. You can use a strap over the back. I've done that a lot of times. Sometimes I haven't, because really you've got to have a grip on the pistol. And so, it just makes one of those more safety factors. It just kind of adds it in. So really the 1911 is a very safe gun to carry.
They are very safe. And, even if somehow you're able to inadvertently get the hammer to fall, you've still got the half cock notch that if the sear isn't depressed, the pistol will fall to the half cock notch instead of falling all the way to the firing pin. So you've got a half cock notch safety in there as well. And some people will carry their 1911s on half cock and then just finish cocking the pistol when they draw it. So that's another safety feature that's built into the 1911s. And then you can roll into some of your more current 1911s like the Kimbers and a few others, the Kimbers and the Colts that are what are called Series 80 guns. And those guns also have a firing pin safety in them as well, and a little lever that as you pull the trigger, it disengages the firing pin safety. So you've got another block in there on those pistols as well.
But it does affect the trigger pull.
It does affect the trigger pull. Generally, you're going to have a heavier trigger pull with the firing pin safety than you do with the Series 70 guns like the Springfields and some others that don't have the firing pin safety.
Yeah, personally, I like the Series 70s.
I'm not a big Series 80 fan either.
No, but it does, again, give you that extra safety feature. Now, some of the differences, the Commander hammer, the rounded off hammer, and that started out with the Commander version.
That's right.
With a 4.25 inch slide barrel. Instead of the government model, which had a 5-inch. And so it was mainly used for officers and commanders, but it was a little bit of a smaller barrel, but it had the same distance in the frame.
Right.
So still went traditionally 7 rounds.
That's right.
But now we're seeing 8 rounds pretty predominantly.
Yeah, 8 rounds is pretty much the common standard now with your 45 ACP 8+1.
And what would you say your favorite mag is? What are some good magazines if you're wanting to look for aftermarket mags?
If I'm looking for aftermarket magazines for my 1911, because a lot of times if you have a problem with a 1911, failure to feed, especially failure to feed issues, whether it's 9mm, 40 caliber, 45 ACP, 10mm, or a variety of other calibers you can do the 1911 in. Most of the time, your issue is going to be a magazine-related issue. And there's 2 that I really recommend. The first one are the Trip Cobra mags. And I'm sure there's a lot of you like, I've never even heard of those. If you're involved in competitive shooting in those circles, those are the go-to magazine for single stack 1911s, and that's the Trip Cobra mag. And the second mag that I really like are the magazines from Dawson Precision. And I think they're almost as good as the Trip Cobra mags. But I do like the Trip Cobra mags a little bit better over the Dawsons, just because of the overall finish of the magazine. They're a really high polished stainless steel. I mean, they're super sleek. There's no burrs on them anywhere. The feed lips are absolutely perfect. And the Dawsons are right there behind them. They just use more of a matte finish on their magazines versus the high polished finish.
And what do you think about the Wilson Combat mags?
Wilson mags are okay, but I've had a lot of failures with them over the years. We were shooting a 1911 a few weeks ago and had some failure to feed issues with a Wilson mag. And, I don't know if it's the spring gets tired on it. It just doesn't raise the rounds up quick enough. But with the Trip magazines and the Dawson magazines, I've never had a failure with either of those magazines. And that's if anyone ever asks me what magazine I recommend for a 1911, it's one of those two.
Right.
And price point wise, they're all about the same. They're all around that $35 range, whether it's the Trips or the Dawsons or the Wilsons. The price point is about the same on all of them.
And I just bought about 10 Wilson Combat mags. That's great. I should have called you first. I like Wilson mags, though. I've had very, very few issues with Wilson, but, it is what it is.
Yep.
Years ago when we used to do a lot of competitive shooting, they had the Packmeyer mags.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, those worked really well.
They did.
But
the
they
Packmeyer
really
mags, and then the McCormick magazines as well.
Yeah.
I've used a lot of McCormick magazines over the years in competitive shooting, especially their 8-round and 10-round 45 ACP magazines, and had great success with them.
Right. But these are just the upgrades.
They are,
and that's what I asked. So we got the right answer. And then there's the flat mainspring housing versus the curved mainspring housing,
and the wedge. You have the wedge as well. So 3 different options as far as the mainspring housing for how you want the pistol to fit and how you want the pistol to point. Normally, for me, with a single stack 1911, I go with a flat mainspring housing, and it points very naturally out of the holster. I can come out of the holster, present it with my eyes closed, open my eyes, and the sights are lined up perfectly.
Right.
Now, with my double stack 1911s or my double stack 2011s, like the STIs or staccatos or the bulls, the infinities, and some of the other ones, I have to run arched mainspring housing on those to get them to point correctly for me.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, and there's not a whole lot of difference. Like if you actually measure a standard 1911 with a set of calipers with standard grips on it versus one of the 2011s, they're almost exactly the same dimensionally, width and length. But for some reason, and I think it's because the front strap on the 2011s are more squared off than the rounded 1911, I have to run the arch mainspring housing on those to get it to point the same.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yep.
Now, the 2011s, that's a big deal. And I know you've built a lot of those.
A lot of 2011s. And, they're until just a few years ago, the 2011s that STI made and several other companies, they weren't mainstream. And then STI changed over. It changed hands a couple of times with some different owners, and they rebranded the company Staccato. And once they rebranded the company Staccato, they really started pushing those handguns more toward the mainstream market. And I think at that point, a lot of people now recognize the 2011, the wide body double stack 1911s as more of a viable option, especially if someone's looking for more of a high-end handgun to carry or shoot competitively. The Staccatos and the Bulls and a bunch of the other ones that are out there are a great upgraded option over the original single stack 1911.
Right. Now, one thing that now I was sitting here thinking about something, and then it just blew me. Okay, we're going to be taking some questions here in just a few minutes. So if you have some, go ahead, and Sarah Mac's going to give me an idea. Now, the one thing about these as well is, of course, the size. And one thing we didn't talk about was the officer's model. And we have a little Rock Island Armory, more of your officer's model, shorter grip, shorter slide, and then, of course, a lot of the minis. And those are really popular with concealed carry. Let's talk a little bit about Rock Island Armory.
I tell you, the Rock Island Armory is a company that really, they've been producing 1911s for several decades, but it's always been kind of a budget gun. It's always been not so reliable. And about 15 years ago, they hired a master gunsmith. His name was Fred Craig, to come over and revamp their entire 1911 program, from their design, their manufacturing processes, their fitting processes. And Fred really brought the Rock Island Armory 1911s from a firearm that most people wouldn't even consider buying into one of the best budget 1911s you can possibly get. And, everything about these guns, the slide to frame fitment, the finish, the sights, the trigger, the fire control group, everything about these guns it's a great
they
platform.
are great guns. I think the only thing really to me that I wish Rock Island Armory would do is, I mean, I like their parkerized finishes.
They are. Yep.
And they're standard and they're fine. I mean, because they're budget guns.
And it's a good, durable, cost-effective finish. And I agree with you because I know exactly where you're going with this. I would love to see a higher end finish on those guns, like a black nitride or a Tenifer or melanite or even hard chrome.
Right.
But something a little more 21st century than the old parkerized finishes.
Well, they released a stainless steel version a few years ago, and now they're thinking about bringing it back.
Mm-hmm.
It's just more expensive to produce and everything. But Rock Island Armory sells more 1911s than anyone in the world. And Martin Twasson, who is a friend of mine, actually, he is a strong Second Amendment supporter. He's a great guy. His brain is going 100 miles an hour. In fact, the 22 TCM, which we're not getting into calibers yet, but the 22 TCM with a 9mm conversion is one of my favorite 1911s because you can, the 22 TCM is incredibly soft to shoot, but yet we put out watermelons and it'll just blow them up, and it's pretty impressive. But
and ballistically, the 22 TCM is it's a 22 caliber projectile, about 40 to 50 grains, and it's pushing it over 2,000 foot per second out of a standard 5-inch 1911.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
Yep.
And then you got your 9mm barrel, you can switch it out, so you can get to your 9.
Yep.
But that's actually one of my favorite 1911s to shoot. I just love it. Now, but also, let's go ahead and talk about it. Well, let's go. Do we have some questions? Okay, let's go ahead. We're going to go into some questions first. We don't want to leave you guys out.
Okay. Chuck Oakes asked 38 Special or 38 Smith & Wesson?
I think it's 38 Smith & Wesson.
Yeah.
For the history.
Right,
part.
for the older stuff. Yep.
This isn't really a question, but I thought this would be good for Robbie. Chambered Elite 77 says, I am a lefty. Can use a 1911 with an Ambi Safety can't use a 1911 with an Ambi Safety. During recoil, my index finger pushes up on the safety slightly. Impending movement of the slide causes malfunctions.
On an Ambi Safety. Yeah. So with me, I'm a lefty as well. And I only use single side safeties in all of my 1911s and 2011s. And I use my index finger to release the magazine. And I've had some issues over the years with, like you were talking about with my grip, inadvertently dropping the magazine. And one thing that I've done with all of mine is I went with a heavier magazine release spring. And then you can play with your magazine release length as well. There's the standard length ones, there's the extended ones, and there's the extended ones with an oversized button on it. And you can play with some different length magazine releases, as well as different tension magazine release springs to help you as well with not releasing that magazine. But as far as the Ambi, I got away from the Ambis. I tried one for a while. I tried using my thumb for a while, but I've used my index finger to drop the magazines for so long that it just didn't feel natural to me to use my thumb to drop a magazine. And so I ended up going away from them. And also for like tabletop starts and things like that, picking it up off the table. A lot of times I had a tendency of pushing down on the pistol and releasing the magazine as I was picking it up. So I went back to just the left side magazine release.
Joey Savoy asks, Such, is there a price level you wouldn't go under for quality 1911, or is there any quality 1911s at a budget price?
Well, I'll tell you, I have done a number of Springfield Armory 1911s lately. They are reasonably priced for for the quality they put into the 1911s. So if I was really looking for quality, now I'll have to say that one of my favorites here lately has been the Bull.
Oh, absolutely.
Bull Armory. My gosh. I don't know what it is, man.
That is the Bull 1911s. And in my YouTube channel, Robbie Wheaton, I just finished.
We got a link for his YouTube channel down below, by the way.
I just finished a review on the Bull, and we're getting it finished up, and we'll have it up on our YouTube channel. You can search either Robbie Wheaton or Wheaton Arms, either one, to find it on YouTube. But we just finished the review on the Bull 1911, and I'm telling you that if you handed me that gun and didn't tell me who made it, I would think that was a $3,500 1911. the fit, the finish, everything about that gun. They did not miss any detail on that gun, no matter how small. They touched everything on that gun. It is absolutely amazing.
It's so tight,
yeah,
but it's reliable.
Yep,
it's very reliable.
And they're, you know, and I would put that 1911 in the budget category of 1911s from $500 to $800. And that one, I think it's about the street price. I found them online for about $850. And then you've got the Rock Island Armories, which once again is a very good budget 1911 that offers, you know, it's just a no frills gun. You can get it with the beaver tail grip safety and some checkering and stuff. And you can pick those up for around $550.
I think even less.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it's something else. Okay.
DZ Wren says, thoughts on the 1911s that are coming from the CMP?
Well, typically, now those are real collectible. I mean, being military, that's the big plus for that.
It is. Those are primarily collector's items, and there's different grades. You've got your field grade, your rack grade, your service grade, all the way up through your collector grade, and just kind of depending on where your budget's at and what you're looking for. But if you're looking for a truly collectible 1911 from any of those grades at just about any price point, the CMP 1911s are a great option.
Yeah, and two, it because the 1911 is funny because, you know, I can take an old government 1911 that's like one of the military surpluses, and yeah, it may be a little loose, but there's something about it knowing that it served the U.S. military, and I think that's one of the big reasons why the 1911 has held on for so long.
Yes, and
now with all the upgrades, it makes it a viable gun.
And the military still uses them. A lot of your special operations groups still use the 1911 today, and they're upgraded. They've got light rails and a bunch of other accessories on them, but it's still the base 1911 with some 21st century features to it.
Right.
Jeffrey Harrison says, so can a full size be changed into a commander size?
Yes, it's just a slide and a barrel swap.
Well, that's easy enough, but you don't cut the barrel and cut that'd be a living nightmare.
That would be a living nightmare.
Conservative Sniper Hunter asks, what is the worst feature of the 1911?
Mag capacity.
Magazine capacity. Yeah.
Mag capacity. And then when you go to the staccatos or the 2011s. Yeah, the 2011s.
Yep.
You do get just a wider body.
Yep.
But then again, you eliminate the mag capacity problem.
But then there's a cost difference between your standard 1911s at say $1,000 versus you go to a wide body gun and you double the price of the gun.
Now, one thing though that I love about the 1911 is the ergonomics. I mean, just the natural grip, the thinness, pointability is like unbelievable. I mean, it's like an extension of your hand. That's one of the reasons why it makes such a great combat gun.
Well, and that's it. You know, if you take your hand and you just point like this, the angle that your hand is in when you're pointing is the angle of the grip on a 1911.
Right.
So it points very, very naturally.
Well, how many companies come out and say this is the same grip as a 1911?
That's right.
That's one of their big selling points.
Yep.
But really, as far as that goes, and to the complication, it's a little more complicated. Disassembly is a little more complicated.
Disassembly, yes. Disassembly is a lot more complicated with a 1911 than say with a Glock or a lot of your other firearms. And we just finished up a disassembly and reassembly video on YouTube, on my YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Check of the Kimber. We did the Kimber Series 80 1911 and stripped it all the way down, took everything off of it, walked you through the entire process for disassembly and reassembly with the pistol. And once you've done it a few times, it's really not nearly as difficult as you think that it is. But the first time you do it and you dump all of the parts out of the back of the gun, you're like, oh Lord, what just happened?
And you know what you're doing. That's what's scary. Well, when I used to do competitive shooting pretty heavily, I mean, I was always working on my guns.
Oh, yes.
There's certain things, tweaking different things, and it's complicated.
Yeah, it can definitely be overwhelming the first time you dump all the guts out of the back of one. And that was one of the things that we really tried to focus on in the video was all the little intricacies and the nuances that go into reassembling all of the back end parts, especially on a Series 80 gun, because the Series 80s, you've got some extra parts back there that have to be fitted in a very specific order for everything to go in the gun properly. And I think we did a really good job walking through the entire disassembly and reassembly process with a lot of really close-up shots that detail how things go together.
Okay, we'll go to one more and then we'll come back to questions.
David Goodnow asks 6 hour P250 P230 subcompact in 45. I've been seeing them under $400. Any thoughts?
That's a great price.
Yeah.
For any SIG.
Yeah. It is. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the triggers in them, but they are a reliable pistol. And for $400, hey, it's worth adding one to the collection for that, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, let's go back to some of our list, because we do want to touch on some things that are pretty cool, and we're at the halfway mark right now. So, all right, better metallurgy.
Oh yes, that's from the guns, the original guns in 1911, all the way up through the 40s, 50s, 60s, even into the 70s. You know, they used basically the same type steels, and then in the 70s and early 80s, when competitive shooting really started to take off, a lot of the 1911s, your custom gun manufacturers started making significant improvements to the firearms with the parts, with the accessories, and with the metallurgy that they use to build these guns. You know, now you can buy a 1911 with a polymer frame. You can get them with titanium frames. You can get them with steel, stainless steel, aluminum. You know, there's just a tremendous variety of materials that are used in your current 1911s versus the original all blued steel or carbon steel 1911s.
Now, one thing I like, and one thing that Springfield Armory specifically does, is they forge their slides, they forge their barrels.
Yep.
You know, it's a really it gives it longer service life.
It does.
And especially in 10 millimeter, which, you know, really makes a big difference. Now, so calibers. Let's talk about calibers first. Let's go back to calibers.
Okay.
Yeah, we have our 45. That's traditional.
Yep, the traditional 45. You have 22 long rifle. You can go all the way down to the 22 in these with conversion kits, and that's just a barrel, a magazine, and generally a slide.
Or you can buy a dedicated 22 1911s.
That's right. Or you can buy dedicated 22 1911s. And then you step up to some of your smaller versions of the 1911s that are chambered in 380 ACP, like the Colt Mustangs and the SIG P238s. And then you move into your full-size 1911s, and those generally start with 9 millimeter, 10 millimeter, 45 ACP, 450 Roland,
38 Super,
some specialty guns like from Clark Custom in 38 Special, that were some of their bullseye guns that they built. But as far as commercially available stuff, you know, your 9s, your 10s, your 45s, 450 Roland.
The 450 Roland is pretty impressive. I have a 450 Roland.
It is very impressive. It's ballistically equivalent to a 44 Magnum out of a 45 ACP. It is a monster cartridge.
Yeah. And
then you've got some of your non-specific calibers like the 45 Super, which falls in between the 45 ACP and the 450 Roland. You've got the 45 Gap.
Did we mention 38 Super?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep. Yeah, 38 Super, 38 Super Comp, 9x23. Was it a 9? There's a Dillon, a 9 millimeter Dillon cartridge, a 9 millimeter Jarrett cartridge. A lot of specialty cartridges like that for competitive shooting that have been released over the years. But I think most of those nowadays have been generally eclipsed by the 38 Super Comp.
Yeah.
And the difference between a 38 Super and a 38 Super Comp is the Super was a semi-rimmed cartridge, where the Super Comp itself is rimless and allows you a little more capacity in your double stack magazines.
And what's really funny is, even though the 1911 was designed around 45 ACP, 9 millimeter has eclipsed it in popularity.
Yep.
Softer shooting, in fact, really soft shooting.
Very, especially in a full size, full weight, 43 to 50 ounce 1911. It's incredibly soft shooting.
So, in fact, Sarah Mack, that's one of her, the bull in 9 millimeter. She was like, I love that gun.
She's over here bobbing her head up and down. She's like, yeah, that's mine now.
Me, I like the 10 millimeter. I'm
a huge fan of 10 millimeter. It is one of my favorite cartridges for like all around do everything cartridge. But I don't like the 10 millimeter in the 45 ACP. And I'll tell you why.
You mean the 1911?
Yes, the 1911, not the 45 ACP.
I don't know about that one.
Take two. But the 10 millimeter in the 1911 is a very brisk cartridge. There's a lot of recoil with that gun, and I've got I shoot 1911s a lot, and I've got a lot of grip strength, and I have to readjust my grip a lot when I'm shooting a 1911 in a 10 millimeter. So I prefer the Glock Model 20 because I think the polymer frame flexes some when you're shooting the pistol and absorbs some of the recoil energy and is much easier to hang on to than the all steel 1911s.
You know, it's funny because I find it a little different with the 1911 and 10 millimeter because my hands are smaller.
Right.
And so for me, I feel like I have a better grip on it.
Yeah.
It's more controllable. But in the Glock Model 20, which I love, and the 29, is like a 2x4, even though I love shooting it anyway. And that's one of the things I love that's come out, and we're getting away from 1911s, but the Smith & Wesson M&P 2.0 and the Springfield Armory XD Series Elite, XDM Elite. I mean, those are really ergonomic grips.
They are. And both of them in 10 millimeter are very easy to shoot.
And so 10 millimeter may be another upcoming subject. But yeah, 10 millimeter. Okay. Tools and techniques. Tools. What kind of, obviously a barrel wrench that comes in handy a lot of times.
That's one of the first things, especially with your traditional 1911s that have a barrel bushing. Having a barrel wrench to be able to remove, or having a bushing wrench to remove that bushing out of the end of the slide is almost a must-have tool, especially with your tighter fitted 1911s today. Your older 1911s, some of the mil-spec stuff, that the bushing to barrel fit and bushing to slide fit is kind of sloppy. A lot of times you can do those with your fingers, but pretty much anything that's coming out today, you're going to have a bushing wrench to be able to remove that bushing. And then you've got a lot of specialty tools with these. You have your Allen wrenches and your Torx wrenches just for removing the grips. There's a specialty screwdriver for removing the grip bushings that the grip screw goes into.
Oh yeah.
Different punches for taking your fire control group out of the back. You'll need some different punches for that. You'll need a different punch for taking the mainspring housing off. And then you go into actually fitting the parts, and you're going to need, there's different stones that you need, different files that you need. And if you want to customize your pistol and upgrade it yourself, you can get checkering files in 20 LPI, 25 LPI, 30 LPI, even 40 LPI, lines per inch, if you want to try your hand at hand checkering your front strap or the top of your slide.
Whew.
Yeah.
You better know what you're doing.
And I tell you, I have hand checkered one 1911 in my life. And when I finished that one, I was like, I will never hand checker another all steel 1911 again. That was and I did it pretty much all at one time, where a lot of people, they'll checker for a while and walk away from it. And I did it start to finish in basically one setting session. And it was probably one of the most difficult tasks that I have ever done. And not just keeping all the lines straight, but just the hand fatigue and the wrist fatigue from running that file just thousands and thousands of times over the slide, getting all those lines cut and getting the little triangles pointing up exactly perfect like you want it.
Yeah.
It is so much work.
Just looking at that is like, wow, somebody, I mean, of course they do it a lot with machines now.
The majority of your 1911s that we'll say the majority, unless you're getting a really high-end custom 1911, the majority of your 1911s that you buy today that have checkering on the front strap, or it's going to be machine cut checkering.
But the funny thing is about checkering is it's the front strap and the back strap are where you hold the gun.
That's right.
And with your standard 1911s typically, or your more budget guns, they have just a smooth front strap.
That's right.
So it does add a lot. Now let's talk about recoil systems. We talked about barrels.
Yep.
I mean barrel bushings.
Yep.
But the full length guide rods, which I've become a big fan of those.
Absolutely. The original 1911 came with a 2-piece guide rod. You had your end plug and then a little short guide rod, and then the spring just kind of floated in space in between the frame and the slide. And it worked, but you take one of those guns apart that you've shot for a long time, and the spring looks like a snake. It's like this, where it's been bent and twisted inside there. And the solid one-piece guide rods, steel one-piece guide rods, or polymer one-piece guide rods, really they keep that spring in alignment.
Right.
So it just moves back and forth. And you take one apart that's got 5,000 rounds or 10,000 rounds on it, and that spring is still as straight as the day it was you installed it in the pistol.
Right. It seems to be smoother shooting.
It does. It smooths it out. Because the spring's not binding and catching as the slide cycles. So, and it also adds, you can do steel or you can do tungsten in your one-piece guide rod, and that adds some static weight up front which helps reduce recoil and muzzle flip on the pistols as well.
All right, let's go to a few more questions, and because we don't want to skip you guys, but there are a couple things I really want to talk about.
Conservative Sniper Hunter asks, what is the best modern 1911 type pistol on the market? This will open up a barrel of squiggly worms.
The best. Well, I mean,
yeah. Well, I mean, I think for me, it would probably be one of the Cabot guns. I think those are some of the nicest 1911s out there, and they've got a price tag that reflects that. But they build really, really high-end 1911s. They've won the bullseye matches at Camp Perry for the last several years with the Cabot guns. Just a tremendously accurate 1911.
Didn't they make one out of like a meteorite?
They made two out of a meteorite. Yep, they split the meteorite and made two 1911s out of it. And I think those guns sold at auction for maybe a little over $1 million
Wow.
for the pair.
Wow.
Yeah, I think they were two of the most expensive 1911s ever sold.
Wow. Yeah.
But very impressive.
Then you have Nighthawk, you have Wilson Customs. I mean, there's a lot of really high end.
Absolutely. Nighthawk, Wilson Combat. And then, you look at, I go back to Bull. The Bull guns are a custom 1911 with a production gun price. So Dan Wesson's another production gun with a custom gun with a production gun price.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Still a little higher than like your Springfields and your Kimbers.
Right.
Now, let me say something about Kimbers, because Kimbers over the past few years, they went through a rough spot.
Mm-hmm.
They did. They went through a rough spot. And but the Kimbers now, and in fact, one of the guys that's engineer at Kimber got in touch with me, was asking me some questions. And so I've done a couple of Kimber reviews since then. And we've talked a lot about them upping their quality control, their QC.
Yep.
So, Kimbers in the past have had a little bit of issue, but I wanted to bring this back out because Kimbers are really coming strong now. And, a lot of companies have gone through that kind of stuff.
They do. There's always ebbs and flows and ups and downs with different companies. But yes, Kimber has improved their quality with their 1911s significantly.
Right.
Their barrel to bushing fit is as good as anyone in the business. Their slide to frame fit is really good as well. And then the fire control group, they use MIM parts in their fire control group. And as long as you're not going in there trying to stone things and get a better trigger job, the MIM parts work great.
And we're going to talk about that in a sec.
Yep.
Detroit Breakdown asks, seriously, you guys, if you only had ball ammo, which one would you choose?
It'd just be 230 grain ball. And from manufacturer, I really don't care. Remington, Winchester, Federal.
Fiocchi.
Yep.
Fiocchi, number one.
Yep.
They sponsor our ammo. And that's good shooting stuff.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, that round has been perfected.
Yeah, it has.
And there's so many different companies out there. But if you want to step it up, typically go with more of your quality ammunition.
And I tell you, when I carry a 1911, that's what I carry in it today. I still carry 230 grain ball in it.
They all fall to ball.
It works.
That's right.
It works.
And that's one thing too, especially if you're on the, the side where you're putting some ammo back.
Mm-hmm.
Putting back 9mm jacketed hollow point is super expensive.
Yep.
And so you can actually have a 45 and put back ball ammunition, and you're good to go.
That's right.
Have you noticed the shields are still up? Ask. Rock Island Armory M1911 45. Any good? Question mark.
They absolutely are. We talked about this earlier in the episode. They had a master gunsmith come over there. It's probably been 15 years ago or more now. His name is Fred Craig, and revamped their entire build process with their 1911s. And they are without question the best budget 1911 that you can buy today.
Yeah, the metallurgy. The way their production, their fitting. Now there are a lot of good quality 1911s actually that are coming out of Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a bunch of Metro Arms and just a bunch of different ones. We've done some reviews on them, and I've been fairly impressed. I'll still have to say, and the finish. I like the finish on the Turkish guns a little better.
I agree with that over
the
just the Parkerized finish that you get with the Rock Island Armory. The Parkerized finish is great. It's durable. It's been used for well over 100 years. But there are nicer looking finishes that are available today.
But I think the quality of the 1911, the Rock Island Armory is better.
It is.
I think it's just a better quality. And so if you're looking for a good utility 1911 that you just want to take out and shoot, I think it's an excellent choice.
David Bruns says, Such, when are you going to review one of the Cossaint Arms 1911s? I think they're based in Flat Rock, North Carolina.
Oh, yeah, that's that's less than an hour from here.
Yep.
It's about 40 minutes,
Yeah.
maybe 30 minutes. I've heard about those guys, but maybe I need to go up. We need to go up and
We need to
visit
take a
them.
visit.
We'll
There
go
we
up and
go.
visit them.
James Meyer asked, does anyone make one blue steel or blued steel?
Oh yeah, there's lots of blued steel 1911s available today. The Kimbers you can get in blued steel, Colts you can get in blued steel, Springfield Armories you can get in blued steel. Pretty much any of your major manufacturers for 1911s, you can get those guns in blued steel. Your Ed Browns, your Wilson Combats, and the list just goes on and on and on that you can get in blued steel.
Well, we have one of the Garrisons right here,
Mhm.
and it is a no frills. It does have the beaver tail
Right.
and everything. It has some nice features to it, but to me, for a basic, the blue on that is beautiful. They do the hot salt bluing, and a lot of the Springfield Armories do that.
Joseph Hack asked, different types of buffer system, traditional or internal better?
I use in all of my 1911s, I run aluminum buffers or an aluminum shock buff. I used to run the urethane shock buffs in it to help absorb some of the blow of the slide coming to the rear. The only downside that I found to the urethane ones were they wore out really quickly, especially shooting competitively. You're 1,000 rounds a day at the range when you're training, and you're going through 2 of the urethane buffers a day at the range. And so I switched over to 150 thousandths aluminum buffer probably 15 years ago or more. And the aluminum buffers last thousands and thousands of rounds. And even when it starts painting the edges and rolling the edges out on it, you can take it out and take a round chainsaw file and just roll all the edges back in and put it back in the gun and go back to using it.
And the urethane buffers can sometimes come apart, and
They
then
can
they'll malfunction your gun.
Right. When they start breaking apart, they'll absolutely cause malfunctions in your gun.
Dram Van asked, is it true only one company can technically call it a 2011?
I think the patent expired on that, but there may be some trademarks on the term 2011 that are restricted to Staccato and Infinity, which shared that patent and may share that same trademark.
And I'll tell you guys, we were at Jaeger's Tactical Response about a month ago, and Chris Costa was there, and I believe he was shooting one of the Staccatos.
Mm-hmm.
He traded some guns out, but he was shooting it, and man, it was just phenomenal.
Oh yeah.
I mean, of course, watching him, he's like got this dance of death going on. That was worth the trip just watching him. But yeah, that's a very viable gun. Okay, one more question, and we're going to go back.
Best CPA 2014 asked, I heard 1911 isn't as reliable as the CZ. Is that true? If I already bought the CZ SP01, what's your thought process on getting a 1911 additionally?
Yeah, your 1911s that you buy today are extremely, extremely reliable handguns. And it really doesn't matter what manufacturer, as long as you go with one of your bigger manufacturers, they're very reliable guns. We talked about earlier the magazines in the guns. I like the Trip Cobra mags or the Dawson Precision magazines for them. Generally, if you have a failure, it's going to be one of 3 things. It's going to be magazine related, it's going to be extractor tension related, or it's going to be ammunition related. And those are generally the 3 failures that you see with these guns are one of those. Magazines doesn't raise the round up high enough and it nosedives on the feed ramp. Extractor tension is too much and won't let the slide close all the way, or the ammunition profile is either too long or too short for that particular gun and won't feed correctly.
But the CZ SP01 is an incredible gun.
Oh yes,
there's no doubt about it. Plus the higher round capacity.
Yep.
But yeah, but there are some parts that can be fragile in any of the CZs.
They are. The slide stop is probably the weak link in all of the CZs. Just about anyone that shoots competitively with the CZs or the Tanfolios or any of the CZ variants, when they go to the range or go to a match, they always carry extra slide stops because those parts do tend to break on a regular basis. So with your CZ that you have, that's the one part that I would consider getting extras of, or extra slide stops, because that is a failure point and a weak point in that design.
Okay, let's talk about accuracy.
Accuracy can be from one end to the extreme, like with some of the old rack grade CMP guns. It could be more of a pattern than a group. All the way up through your high-end 1911s, like the Cabots and some others, which are capable of shooting under an inch at 50 yards. and there's everything that falls in between that.
So what affects that?
Most of the effect with that is the slide to frame fit, and then the barrel and barrel bushing, or with a bull barrel, the fitment between the barrel and the slide itself. And then the recoil spring can play a part in it as well. If you're running too light a recoil spring in the gun, it can allow the gun to unlock early, which can affect accuracy too.
Yeah. So the old barrel bushings, and they switched from the flange or the fingers, and they switched to a solid.
Right.
But the flange actually helped to stick to the barrel.
It did. Yep.
So,
and it provided a pretty consistent lockup, but it also created drag and friction on the gun, which slowed the slide down and could cause some malfunctions.
Right.
So with the new bushings that are out today, the bushings are fitted very tight to the slide. They're fitted very tight to the barrel with just enough movement to allow the barrel to actually cycle inside the gun. And then you can go with a bull barrel, which is actually fitted to the inside of the slide itself, and get an even tighter lockup.
Now we've talked about, let's talk about MIM parts versus forged parts.
Yep. So MIM'd, which is metal injection molded, they basically take a powdered metal and put it into a casting or a form and apply heat to it, heat it, melt all the powder together, and then it goes through a heat treat process and polishing and all of that. But the MIM'd parts, one of the downsides that I see to MIM is you can't do any kind of work to it. You can't take those parts. It's like a casting. So you can't take those parts. You can't stone them or anything to be able to get, a different sear angles or change the height on your hammer hooks or anything like that. And once you cut through the case hardening on the surface of those parts wear out really quickly. So for that reason, I prefer forged parts or billet parts, especially for my fire control group, my hammer, my sear, my disconnector. I always try and put billet parts in all of my personal guns just because of the longevity that you get with those and the ability to be able to stone and polish and change some angles to get the kind of trigger pull that I prefer with my guns.
And that's probably one of the things that changes a budget 1911 to a really nice quality 1911.
Yes, going from the billet parts or from the MIM parts to the billet parts is definitely going to add cost to the manufacturing process, which allows a lot of companies to be able to sell a 1911 at $800, $900, $1,000 or less, or by using the MIM parts, because you can produce those parts at a much lower cost than producing the forged billet parts.
Right. And then of course forging versus, of course, it'd be the same thing.
Yep.
Casting.
Right. Exactly. Same with forgings versus castings. It's a cut from a solid block of steel versus being basically melted and poured into a mold.
Right. And possible variations.
Lots of variations
with the heat treating and everything like that. Okay. Let's see if we got something else we want to go, or we'll just go to some questions. Is there something else we want to touch on? Looks like it's been pretty.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of stuff.
There's some differences with the barrels on the pistols. You've got basically four types of barrel systems you can get with these guns. You can get a standard traditional barrel that's called it's a non-ramped barrel. And then you have your ramped barrels, and there's a couple of different styles of ramped barrels. There's a Wilson-Nowlin ramped barrel, and that's a fully supported barrel. So it fully supports the case and the case head itself, which reduces, if you're running high pressure loads, it reduces the potential of having a case head separation. So you've got your Wilson-Nowlin ramped barrels, and then you also have your Clark Para ramped barrels. I prefer the Clark Para ramped barrels. I think it gives you a little more support on the standing lug on the bottom of the barrel than the Wilson-Nowlin. But it seems from an industry standpoint that the Wilson-Nowlin with production guns seems to be more popular than the Clark Para ramp.
Now, and what about lapping?
Lapping the slide.
Fitting the slide.
Yeah. That's how you get that buttery smooth feel with a slide to frame fit. You get it, you cut everything to where it's really close and it just starts to go on. And then you use lapping compound on the frame rails and the slide rails, and you work the slide back and forth and basically hone the slide and frame together. And that gives you just a perfect fit where you can, even without oil on it, it just feels like it's sliding on bearings.
Right. Yeah, I know that a lot of times you would get it was oversized, and then you would just work it down to where it was just the right fit.
That's right. You mill the frame and get everything close, and then it's lapping compound from there, and you just work everything until you get that buttery smooth feel with it.
And so that's the reason, guys, again, you've got your budget 1911s like the Rock on Armory or the Metro Arms or some of the other TSIS, I think they make them. And then you move it up the line. And as you move up, you got to decide, I mean, are you going to get, the Prius, or are you going to get a Lamborghini?
Right.
And I mean, they're just budget options. Okay, we got a couple more questions. We'll hit those before we click out.
David Brunn says, guys, and Sarah Mack, have you shot any of the Gerson 1911s? I see them regularly for around the $500 mark in stores. Got to dry fire one, and the trigger pull was a crisp 3 to 3.5 pounds.
Yeah, Gerson makes some really nice firearms. It's funny, I've done some Beretta clones from them, and they're just really good little. I mean, they're just good quality guns. I mean, we just, and I didn't put like 10,000 rounds through it.
Well, and I was going to say the same thing. I've shot a couple of their 1911 variants and, 100 rounds, 150 rounds, but I haven't put, a ton of rounds through them to be able to say what kind of reliability you get out of them long term. But for the rounds that I put through them, they were 100% reliable and shot very well.
And I think the same company that makes those, the Gersons, probably makes the Metro Arms and some of those, because a lot of these companies are like together. They just kind of market them differently. I've got a couple of Metro Arms. I've got one that's the double stack, and it's a great shooting gun. And then I have one with the bob.
Right.
And that's one thing, that bob at the bottom.
Right. The little bobbed frame at the bottom.
Right. Now that can affect your accuracy.
It changes how the gun feels in your hand. Yeah. It really changes how it feels a lot. But from a concealed carry standpoint, the one area on a 1911 that tends to print is the back of the grip. And when they chop that off and bob it, it makes it a much more concealable option.
Scott Wilson asked, what do you think of the standard manufacturing 1911?
Now I have not handled their 1911s.
I haven't either.
But they're really, from what I understand, they're good quality. It's funny, the switch gun.
Yep.
And they make the DP12 and they make Thunderstruck.
Yeah.
But they also make this high-end 1911 and 45 single action revolvers like Colt.
Interesting.
So it was really funny. They have kind of a two different lines going. The guys at Standard, I've gotten to know them, and they're great guys. In fact, that little switch gun, it's got like 2.5 million views on it. Everybody loves that little thing. But that is their budget line. I haven't experienced, but I'm very much aware of their 1911s. And from the pricing, they're a little bit more of a higher end as far as the pricing goes. Again, not seeing them. But I would. So I can't really give you an opinion because I haven't had any.
Me either.
But the company itself is a really solid. Those are solid guys over there.
GAC Plinking asks, what's your opinion on extended guide rods?
Extended, like past the end of the muzzle? Now, I always run just a one-piece guide rod that ends up basically flush with the end of the barrel. So, but I don't run anything any longer than that. I mean, I've seen some stuff out there that guys offer for like standoff devices, so you can still allow the gun to fire if the muzzle presses against something. But I've never had any experience or use with any of those.
Jose L. Cruz asked, what is your opinion on Para Ordnance 1911-45?
Well, at one time, Para Ordnance was an excellent company out of Canada.
When they were in Canada, that's right.
And one of my best buddies carried a 1911 P14. He was a
45.
big boy, and he carried it right there for concealed carry. Those are great guns. But once the Freedom Group and all that, they kind of had a downturn. I don't know if they've changed that since then. Do you know anything about it?
I don't think they're in business anymore.
Yeah.
But if you can find an old Canadian gun, those are tremendous 1911s. The USA made stuff, not so much. They changed a lot of things in the guns. They went to what they called their power extractor, which was actually a powerless extractor that wouldn't pull cases out of the chamber. And as well as a bunch of other changes and lower cost parts and stuff in the US made guns. So the Canadian guns, absolutely good to go. The US made guns, I would tend to stay away from those unless you're planning on doing a lot of serious upgrades to that firearm to make it a reliable option.
Okay, guys. Well, it is the 1 o'clock, and we're going to go ahead and sign off. We could talk about 1911s though for weeks.
Yes.
Of course, we can
Yes.
talk about anything from weeks. And Robbie and I will afterwards talk about a lot of stuff.
That's right.
But guys, just, it's a part of history. 1911s are legendary, but it's not. It doesn't stop there. There's a lot of really practical uses for 1911s.
Absolutely.
And buying a good quality 1911 is one of your better shots. Again, I think the Rock Island Armory is one of the best, and Robbie agrees, with a budget friendly firearm. And then you just move up the line. Ruger makes a nice little 1911. They make them. Springfield Armory is just one of my favorites, but Colt, the traditional Colts, my Series 70 sitting there, and I have a couple of others. There's just something very classic about
Well, and
them.
some of my personal favorites are the Bull 1911s and 2011s wide body guns. The Bull firearms are a custom 1911 with a production 1911 price.
Yeah, they are hand fitted.
Yep,
they're hand fitted. And two, the sky's the limit, and of course, taste are the limit. Or unlimited if that's what you want to do.
The only limit's your budget.
Yeah,
it really is. Especially when it comes to 1911s, you can spend as little as you want or as much as you want and get a quality firearm, reliable firearm at just about any price point.
Yeah, now with the rails they're putting on the front slide serrations, they're really upgrading it. And every one of those things, while it's more accessories, it's not just bling.
Yep.
A lot of it is very functional.
That's right.
So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope we answered a lot of your questions. I'm sure we missed a lot, but we had a lot of fun.
We did, for sure.
We can sit around and talk about 1911s anyway.
And if you get a chance, make sure you check out my new YouTube channel. It's Robbie Wheaton or Wheaton Arms. We've got a bunch of new 1911 videos coming up, as well as a lot of other videos that are already up on the site. So if you get a chance, check that out.
Yeah, definitely. The link will be down below. It is down below in the description. Also, we appreciate Sportsman's Guide. Again, you get $20 off every $100 or more purchase using Such, no 00. And it's just a great resource.
Yep. And make sure you check out their Buyers Club as well. Their Buyers Club, you get additional savings as well as free shipping on any order over $49.
Yeah, and I'm a member of their Buyers Club.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Okay. So, guys, and again, we really appreciate Sarah Mack for being over there, answering questions, helping us get everything set up, and keeping Robbie and I
as straight as possible.
Yeah, if that's possible. So, thanks for coming by. Thanks for the great questions. Be strong. Be of good courage. God bless America. Long live the Republic.